and are re-energized and caffeinated for our next session. Again, thank you to our panelists and moderator for being patient while everyone was taking their break. The previous session ran over, so we needed to kind of accommodate for everyone's stretch a little bit. So thank you for that. For this session, we're going to be talking about the regulatory aspects for AI in banking. So banks are looked at as high trust companies. But how can trust be built in AI models when used in banking? Can AI models be built without any guardrails? Would regulatory guardrails rein in with responsible or ethical AI principles? Are there any useful global frameworks to build vertical AI products that banks use? Let's hear these and more. Calling upon stage Sharda Balaji, who interacts extensively with entrepreneurs building stuff, including incubating ideas and accelerating legal tech companies under NovoJuris. Sharda is going to be our moderator for this conversation. She's the founder and managing partner of Novojouris Legal, an award-winning corporate technology and IP firm based in Bangalore and the US. She specializes in venture fund formation, investment, M&A, technology laws, and she's an active angel investor with about 36 companies. She's an LP in a few venture funds and an independent director and advisor in several companies. Thank you for joining us today, Sharda. Our panelists for today are Pankaj and Devang. Pankaj Gupta is the Chief Digital and Marketing Officer at Karnataka Bank. He has been pivotal in Karnataka Bank's digital transformation journey, and he has been instrumental in digitization by leveraging digital platforms to enhance agility, customer centricity, and innovation. His deep understanding of the digital transformation has helped position Karnataka Bank as a progressive institution in the Indian banking landscape. Devang Mundhra is here, our second panelist. He is the CTO and he's the Chief Technology and Product Officer at KredX. And he spearheads the development of innovative solutions to help address working capital and credit gaps for businesses and deploy SaaS and AI-based solutions in supply chain finance. He's also a key voice on deploying impactful technology in the banking sector. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Sharda, Pankaj, and Devang on stage and turn this conversation over to them.
Means, people would not be very happy. I'll just take the 2 minutes and then, yeah. So good evening. Would you be okay if a bank can give a 85% guarantee for your, say, hard life earnings that you keep in a bank?
No.
Would you be okay if a bank gave a disclaimer that they are not responsible for the AI tools they have deployed?
No.
Right. So banks work with high trust regime, and therefore they are very cautious, right? And it would be interesting to hear Pankaj share his thoughts on where they are in the AI deployment. Thanks for an opportunity to Upeka, because I got an opportunity to speak with very senior folks in the banks itself. And some of them are earmarking quite a sum for their AI journeys. Huge opportunity for all of those in the room and otherwise building products meant for regulated entities. Technology can build anything that a mind sets, but essential guardrails are important. So should that be principle-based or like most countries have, or legislative-based like the European Union, which has a EU AI Act? Or should it be use case based, right? Most feel that technology should not be regulated, but the use cases should be. But then the technology is moving so fast that even regulating the use case is becoming difficult, right? Devang has his views on how one can build technology using certain frameworks, and I'm very kicked about hearing both of them. Can those frameworks be global? Because country-specific regulations, technology can be worldwide, but laws are always country-specific. So how can someone build tech products for the world? And India has seen an incredible growth in fintech. And one of the country's dream is to bring in inclusive banking. And I think the fintech sector is the right one positioned for bringing that inclusive growth. And technology and AI tools make it that much more faster. Um, India does not have a specific AI act like EU, but EU has tiered the risks like very high risk, medium, low. And they have also pinned the responsibility not only on the entity that is deploying, but also on the developer itself, which makes it very easy and that brings kind of clarity on who is responsible. But in US, there is no specific act. And if you, the last few judgments that are based on the existing regulations and judicial precedents that have happened, Anthropic or Meta, and the judgments have kind of leaned towards the big tech companies. But these are case specific facts, of course, which also means that for anyone building these products, it's sort of confusing because when you go to the court is more like a post-mortem and you much rather know it while building the product itself. While we say India doesn't have a specific legislation, there are many acts and regulatory directives that has come in, which has an impact on the AI model use and deployment. DPDPA, RBI's KYC guidelines, OSP guidelines, TSP guidelines, digital lending guidelines, cybersecurity framework. And in Feb 2025, RBI notified, let me get this right, Statement of Developmental and Regulatory Policies, and they intend to set up a committee to develop free AI. It's an acronym, it's not free. It says Framework for Responsible and Ethical Enablement of Artificial Intelligence, which talks about explainability, auditability, and leaning towards the glass box model versus the black box systems. But it gives you an idea of how the regulator is thinking for anybody building and wanting to sell to the regulated entities. But the general principles of responsible AI are explainability, transparency, accountability, fairness and non-discrimination, safety and reliability, open data, fair competition, privacy and IP. Now, applying these to the massive number of use cases that I confront with in Novojouris is my Lego toy. It's a massive area to cover. In 30 minutes, I think we'll pick just 3 or 4 grouped questions so that we get to some meaningful depth. Is that okay? All right. First one to you, Pankaj. As bankers, what do they need to keep in mind for using AI for outcomes, and any golden rule on how to pick up those use cases, and how do you decide what to do?
Okay, so firstly, it's a very interesting subject, and I think what I have gained out here is, association with Shraddha to bounce off doubts which are there in my mind as we walk this path. But to answer the question, she has kind of covered. By the way, how many of you serve regulated entities? Most of you, I believe, are serving regulated entities. Banks also? Okay. And you are in AI and Gen AI solutions? Not yet. Okay, cool. So, fair. So, I will give some, I was telling Shraddha that I may have more questions than answers, but that's okay. We'll have a talk. And so her first question was, what are the principles with which you look at, AI? And it is predominantly, what are the need, what is the outcome we are trying to drive? Is it a business outcome? Is it a revenue outcome? Is it an operational efficiency outcome? Is it a customer experience outcome? And work back and see, do we have a solution? Is it working well? Does it need augmentation through AI? So it's a very clinical process of, looking at finally what as an institution we are trying to achieve and narrow down to, whether AI is required or not. By the way, interestingly, I think financial institutions have been using AI for ages. Today, a biometric authentication which happens has a lot of AI ML models which run at the background to do that validation, and it's been there at least for now 10 years, right? Nearly 6 years back when I stepped into the bank, you used, and I'm talking about, some small fundamental use cases. You can call it AI, you can call it ML, you can call it NLP models. Is about, reading your bank account statements or financial statements, converting them into, machine readable inputs, and then taking a decision on that. So these have been available. And banks, by the way, have been the biggest users of technology and digital. I'll kind of keep walking this path, that digital as well as AI, using AI as part of the digital processes which we had, either for customer onboarding or for operational efficiencies. So, Shraddha, the answer to your question is very simple. We stay away primarily from using tech because there's tech. We look at what is it that we are trying to achieve and how tech can help us. And there is a little bit of a paradox, and more so when it comes to AI and Gen AI solutions, right? I was talking to a colleague of mine, and he was saying FOMO, abhi, fear of missing out, kuch karna hai. Yes, even as a bank, what we are trying to do is, we are not saying that everything should get solved, but we have kind of identified, saying till we put all the controls in process, till there is clarity from a, regulator has given a overall paper, but it's still not a guideline or a regulation. Till we learn, we are not going to venture into something which promises a great return, but also comes with high risk, right? So we are also saying that, we'll keep exploring, keep learning small fringe use cases based deployments, and see how it works, what kind of controls you require. She talked about all the, requirements which are there, and build on top of that, learn on top of that. We don't want to wait for everything to be perfect, but we don't want to really be stupid also in terms of getting neck deep into it. So that's my question.
Thank you. And if you see the fintech space right now, Pankaj, a lot of them are in LSP, yeah, and if they have to, and many of them are attempting to have an AI in the lead generation, etc. Right now, one of the things that AI talks about is non-discrimination. Okay, and how do you look at this kind of a non-discrimination? Because many banks, for example, don't give loans to lawyers. Okay, so if there is that kind of a bias already, then how are you building that non-discriminatory approvals, for example, in lending?
So it's quite interesting, because as we work on drafting our AI policy, and one of the principles is ethical and non-discriminatory. One thought which comes to our mind is that banking is built on discrimination. When you lend, it is built on discrimination. Yeah, right? You do scoring. Just that it is that today the scoring is very explainable. Regulator is comfortable. Yes, you can use all these inputs. Use bureau, right? Create a framework in terms of defining what is a risk profile, and you do discrimination in terms of 20 customers will come. We'll bucketize you in probably 8 groups and say, Acha, so you're discriminating at the first step. And then on top of that, the regulator says, once you have discriminated, you cannot discriminate further. So if I have allocated your risk profile in a particular bucket, then I have to equate in that bucket. I can't be, saying that, okay, in this bucket also, I like this guy, right? His hair is shining or his head is shining, so let me give. Can't happen. So it is something which we are also trying to solve. But you're right. I seriously would maybe also seek what is this discrimination, and I think it is not about discriminatory, or primarily you have to build a rule saying what does discrimination mean for you, and which is what we are trying to define. What is it that will not discriminate? Now, that is something also will it come on day one? And when we had our discussion with the board on all this, I think one thing which we have tabled very clearly, saying that we will start, we will put some framework, but be ready. This framework and this policy is will not get archived in stone for the next 5 years. Every 2-3 months, we may want to come back and say, this is the new learning, this is how we'll amend the policy. So it is evolving. It will evolve, and yeah.
I'll come to you, Devang. So, more on explainability concept. So, RBI's 2021 report requires explainable AI models, especially for lending, with periodical recalibration. That's what they say. Now, how do you embed this kind of an explainability while maintaining the model complexity? Right? And you still need to be transparent when asked for by the banks.
Right.
By RBI.
Well, yeah. So, good evening, everyone. So I'll talk from the perspective. I think just a very brief introduction might help to give some context about where this is coming from. The company I'm part of, we've been unregulated for a long time, and then recently we got regulated. So we have seen kind of the sides of what it means to be unregulated and how decisions have, how we have been able to make decisions as an unregulated entity, and then how we have changed our thought process, after we've become regulated, right? So in terms of explainability and taking kind of the thread further from the previous question, right? In terms of, let's say, let's talk about discrimination and what it can. So discrimination also, or in what way is a policy done, or in what way is like a decision made, right? That needs to be explained, right? So a big part around explainability is what is the input that goes in, right? And for input, I think as Pankaj was saying, it's very important to have the frameworks and for somebody to own what that framework is, right? If a credit policy does not need age as a factor, or kind of the hair length as a factor to go into decision making, right? It should be very clear that these are the inputs that needs to go in, and and that input should be kind of set in stone for that period of time, right? And it should be auditable. As developers, we think that providing as much data, as much context will make the decisions better. But like from a regulatory perspective, that is not always the right frame of mind, because like how that data gets used in the model is still a black box, right? So first thing in terms of explainability is to make sure that only the right and the least amount of data is provided. That makes that is needed from the for the decisions to be made, and that is approved by the board, by the entity, right? The second part is the black box versus the glass box paradigm that we were talking about, right? Today most of the models are black box, right? In the sense, like apart from the reasoning models which have come up, where we are able to see the, at least to some extent, the thinking about the models, especially on the Gen AI side, it has been, it's not very easy to understand what explainability is, right? So I think, so the other way a lot of companies are looking at explainability is trying out many different kind of models, many different kind of inputs, seeing the output and sending and using kind of the traditional ML methods, right, to come up with the traditional explainability parameters like Lime, SHAP. So that is like another way where like there's some research which has already been done in explainability on the traditional ML side. How can that be translated on the Gen AI front, right? And the third one is, the output also needs to align with certain safeguards and guardrails that are part of the policy. And so it needs to be validated. It cannot be used directly as, and consumed directly by applications. So that is the other thing that is important from the explainability perspective.
Can I add? So, how many of you are familiar with scorecarding, risk scorecarding in Nobody? Okay, one, two. So typically today, and I'll talk about the example and then on the lighter side. Today, what happens is when you build a scorecard, you basically look at a past historic data of many customers, right? Map some, probably start with some 100 attributes, pump it in, see a correlation, and see how that correlation is translating into, let's say, a probability of default or default. And then you narrow down and you start removing, elements which kind of create more deviant, output, and narrow down to, let's say, 8, 10, 11 elements with weightages very clearly documented. Today, the regulator understands this. You go and tell him, boss, yeah, these are the 11 parameters. This is the weightage. This is the heritage. This is the output. This is how the scoring has happened. Now, fast forward to a GenAI model which does the same. You mentioned a time period, right? And that's very important because such models which today are there, you do validation 6 months, 1 year, you do bad testing, you change it, you fine tune it, right? And you have documentation to explain what happened, what didn't happen. Now, fast forward to AI model where you will know which are the elements which are going in. Probably today you control that. Maybe there will be models which you can't even control that. But you have zero control on the weightages and how it is behaving. It just self adjusts every day. How will you explain? Where is the documentation? And till that time, now this can't be explained in a traditional fashion. Reality is it can't be explained in a traditional fashion. Reality is it will require a statistical output to explain saying everything is working fine. The other reality is regulator does not understand this explainability concept. So till the time the regulator also comes up and says, yes, I know what is this black box, glass box, and explainability in English or in a statistical method is good enough rather than what was explainability, this is never going to get picked up. Right? So explainability is a two-way process. Communication is a two-way process. Explainability from a regulated entity is how the regulator is accepting the explanation. Today, he will not accept. So I think it will evolve, and it is also about the maturity of the regulator to come in and say, okay, this is how. If you explain a risk scoring model, it is okay with us, and that day I think banking industry will start using risk scoring models.
And just to add one more thing, like I think the models will also evolve, right? So I think 6-7 months ago, I was trying to build something just as an experiment, and I used the model to give me a random number, right? And the model just kept throwing 8, right? I think this was ChatGPT, and I kept saying, "Give me a random number," and it kept giving me 8, right? And like 8 is like that's not a random number generator, right? And I tried the same experiment a couple of weeks ago, and now the model kind of writes a small Python code which it executes, and then it gives a random number, random number, which is actually a random number, right? I think the models are also changing in terms of what capability they are bringing and how they're kind of giving the outputs, right? So I think the regulators' mindset, like their how they think about it, and model. I think all of these things will need to evolve to be able to provide like a good explainable output to the use cases which are there.
Interestingly, on one of the use case, right? If you were to use humans for collection, then we have RBI's fair practices framework, right? If you were to use an AI bot to do those collections, we still don't have a regulation on how the AI bot can it threaten, can it use a very high volume, etc. What's your thought on it? It's a very interesting use case.
Sure. So again, I'd love to hear Pankaj's thought on this as well. I'll give my thoughts. Working with few kind of voice agent companies. So collections, I think, is a common use case that like a lot of companies are looking at, like especially like different buckets of collection, and different buckets people are trying to deploy different strategies. The as Shadow was saying, there's no kind of guidelines for voice agents yet, right? But while building the agent, there are a lot of decisions that a developer needs to make, right? Decisions around how long the conversation should be, how long should we, keep pursuing one strategy versus trying out another strategy. Like, how forceful can that conversation be? Like, a lot of times, companies use off-the-shelf kind of voice models, that uh, has a certain tonality. They have, certain ways to speak, right? But like, these are kind of decisions that a developer is making implicitly by using a certain voice model, right, from a certain voice provider. So it's very important for a developer to work with the entity, right? And not ask just the very objective questions, but also a lot of the subjective questions, right? In terms of what training do they already do for their voice agents, right? What are the guardrails that they already have, right? Are they allowed to kind of use a aggressive tone, right? In what cases are they allowed to use aggressive tone? So a lot of these things, a lot of these decisions, which a developer might not be thinking about, when building voice models, it's very important to, kind of surface that and provide regulators knobs, like regulated entities knobs that they can control, right? The more parameters that can be surfaced and the knobs which can be given to regulated entities, um, you know, in what I've seen, it makes the regulated entities a lot more comfortable, and they and kind of more acceptable to try the solution out.
So I'll add, but I'll add on to the last question also, which was happening. Primarily because there are people who are interested in understanding what solutions they can give. So I'll kind of tailor to that. When I gave you the risk model, I gave you something which we are staying away from. But at the same time, what you need to think, and I think she picked it up very well, that is it you should be looking at, a technology, or you should be looking at what kind of solutions, what kind of things will work for regulated entities today. So there's no point breaking your head today. You can build a solution for future, but if you want some business today, it has to be those low risk use cases, which probably the regulator may not be interested in, even in explainability, right? Think about those cases, especially people who are, looking at regulated entities. And as building blocks, there will be other things which will follow, and evolution is happening very fast. So the period may not be very long. I think another 18 months, there is a lot which will be clear, from a regulated industry standpoint. To your collection point, every regulated entity will either have a regulatory guideline or will have a policy which they will have to adhere to in terms of what they do, how they have to do, etc., etc. So in our case, by the way, on the lighter side, how many of you have, seen news? Some suicide has happened, and people are at the branch saying that you pressurized, and because of you, this suicide happened. And these are real situations which we grapple with as a bank, right? And there will be publicity, news channels, politicians will jump in to kind of, So are these, obviously these are aberrations which happen. But I don't know how many of you, there was a very famous case which happened with Mahindra and Mahindra on a farmer did suicide, and Anand Mahindra had to come and kind of, it was all outsourced, right? So we are talking about, and I'm just talking about the collection part. How many of you are aware of that? This thing happened around 8-9 months back, maybe a year back, right? And Anand Mahindra had to come apologize because this thing was entirely outsourced, and it was proven that the outsourced agent went beyond his boundaries to kind of do collection, and the farmer had committed suicide. Extreme case. Policy says that today, whoever is doing a collection, whether it is at the contact center agent or the field collection agent, has to particularly behave in a particular way. has to go through a particular training and a certification, internal certification, to be eligible to do that job for the bank. That the policy says. It's a control mechanism. Translate this to now the voice bot. Yes, we can kind of go and say that yes, we are doing this training, or we go back and convince and make a policy change saying it is okay. The path which we are taking is we are making a policy change for the collection use case because we are convinced that pre-delinquent, early delinquency, deep delinquency we will not do, but early delinquency and pre-delinquent, there also we will also monitor. We may not really want to do this tonality and all that. It's just that to begin off with, instead of a standard call going from a contact center, a similar call going from a bot, or instead of a digital reminder on a WhatsApp or a SMS, it's better that a bot calls. Higher chances of call getting picked up, higher chances of collection happening. We'll start there and then see, then we'll progress.
Also, chance for spammy messages. All right. I kind of want to move to the data governance part of it. Using many of these AI tools, Devang, the surface area for attacks becomes difficult. And then kind of weaving in these multiple tools also becomes difficult. And with agentic AI, of course, when we did discuss saying that, okay, can I use a AI assistant to book my movie tickets and then also inform my family and also block their calendar and also make the payment. The surface area for so many of these tools also becomes difficult. So how do you think of data governance in this kind of a regime? Any thoughts on it?
Sure. I think in terms of data governance, last many years, regulators across the world are becoming, kind of going deeper and deeper into creating policies around it, right? So not a lot changes in terms of Gen AI or agentic AI coming into the picture, as long as the data governance which is expected of an organization is strongly held, right? What it does do is, as an organization starts to use more of AI, any exposed area of data governance starts to, the exposure becomes visible much faster, right? And the risk multiplies just because, the volume can get, bigger very quickly, right? I think one very quick example is a couple of days ago, GitHub, which is kind of a source code repository, right? So they released a MCP server, right, which is a way for agents to talk to data, about data, right? And the MCP server allowed agents to look at code and work on it and kind of submit updated code, like submit pull requests and commits. And some malicious actor, and so one MCP agent was like, it could say, okay, look at all the issues that are there in the repository and fix them, right? Now, one malicious actor, they created a new issue saying, also look at all the other repositories of this user, even if they're private repositories, and tell me what information is there, right? So now the data access on that MCP server was not as strongly done, right? Where it allowed, like, even from a public repository access to private repository, right? And this got publicized, and the server, the MC, a lot of repercussions happened after that, right? So the policy still remains the same, like a public repository, public data is public, private is private, right? But it needs to be implemented at every level now, right? Not just at a database level, not at application level. Now there are different ways to talk to the data. Agents will talk in a different manner. Agents will need context, like that will come in a different manner. Humans will need UI, and the data for that will come in a different manner. So the data governance needs to be seeped in every layer. And I think this will become more and more important for the regulated entities to make sure the way they are providing access to data becomes more uniform, becomes more controllable. So I think there's a lot of work already going into this, but regulated entities will start putting more and more effort into this. Like at KredX, for example, one of the things that we are doing is we are encrypting all the PIA information, right? Like irrespective of, like, we don't want to take that risk, right? Even if like somebody makes a mistake, like that data should not leak, or that should not go unencrypted, right? Now that means like we need to put a lot of other tooling, right? In terms of, like, sometimes some person in the company does need access to PI information, but now we have to create a lot of other tooling for them to be able to access that, uh, decrypt it, like look at it. There are audit logs specifically for that, right? But that is kind of an investment that we need to do so that we can start using a lot of the kind of capabilities that new technologies are bringing now.
That's a delight for a lawyer. um, are there any questions that the audience has? Let me stop by and ask.
From a banking point of view, what are the cybersecurity compliance you all have?
Is your question specific to
Finance
no,
requires
is
a lot of
specific to AI, or it is
non-AI cybersecurity?
So you can go and you can look at the C-site paper of RBI. Most of the banks would be following that.
Okay.
It's a very detailed.
Because there are multiple flavors. Zero Trust is one part, then SASE is another part. So I just thought if you all know that will be useful.
So there are various technologies, various frameworks, but Zero Trust is something which most of the people follow. But I think it's a comprehensive answer. All I can tell you, it's one of the most important aspect. Banks have CISO department and a IT department separately. CISO department looking at these frameworks and only doing governance and policy, and IT department doing this deployment. Have a look at the at the C-site paper on the governance security framework. Right, can't be answered. It will probably require 2 hours to get into a discussion of the entire framework.
Because see, actually, I have an algo trading company that will also have some compliance. SEBI is coming out with the rules. So that's why I just thought I'll start asking a few questions. That's all right.
SEBI has already come with the rules.
They have come, but then in August they're going to come with the real rules. Right now it's a small set of rules. The real rules will come in August. So that's what they said. They postponed it.
The only thing I can add on is, today when we run AI, Gen AI models, and probably a little bit on data also, most of the principles, it's not mature, right? Today, do you do red teaming for our Gen AI model? We all know it is required, but there's no system, no process, no skill available to do that. Who challenges the model in terms of hallucination? Who keeps testing that everything? It's not only security, it's also how do you ensure that it's not hallucinating? It is it has not learnt more than what it should have learnt, etc., etc. So the principles are the same, but the execution frameworks right now are evolving. Okay, and that brings to the point on data also. So from a there are multiple things happening at this point in time in the industry. Obviously, there is the good part is that data residency came into picture. It got clarified, and most of the data providers and service providers brought their data centers into the country, so that problem is sorted. PIA information again is something which people have been conscious, especially the regulated entities have been conscious and have built some kind of controls. Though they are not, there are solutions available to kind of, like he said, encryption. But there are solutions available which can identify data inflow and identify saying this is a PIA information. It should not have been flowing from here to there, right? Because when everything is taken over by systems and machines, you really don't know what is happening. So how do you monitor? Now there are some solutions, but these are piecemeal solutions. Third part and the most interesting part is that what is your policy today? This entire AI is built on learning. It may not store your data, PI data, but it will definitely store the learnings from what it processed. Is that allowed? Is that not allowed? And if it is not allowed, the entire foundation of Gen AI itself will get challenged, right? So we are also waiting for clarity. We are taking a conservative view. So how do you circumvent this? You circumvent this by saying that we will not learn from data from outside. We will only make the model learn from what we have, and we'll ensure that this learning does not get transmitted. Now, some of these principles are understood. At least these are conservative principles till the time there is a regulatory clarity which comes in. But one single point I wanted to add is that today, whether it is security around AI, whether it is data governance around AI, and DPDP will also come together. And there's a consent, again, there are a lot of companies which are trying to do this consent platforms. How do you do consent, right? How do you now ensure that consent is there, right? Now look at, we have 1.5 crore customers. We would have taken some paper consent, ye kar sakta hai, wo kar sakta hai, right? Now, do I wait for a digital consent to kind of interact with them? Or do I use the consent which I have, orchestrate that on a platform and allow the customer to say, I am, decommissioning this consent. Now, all these elements will have to come together for regulated entities to feel comfortable to accelerate. And we are really looking at, providers, maybe not one fintech providers, but an ecosystem to come together and say, here is a holistic solution, which takes care of consent on one side, PII flow on one side, red teaming and, security constraints around Gen AI and holistic, because it all stitches together.
But how do you even choose those kind of tools, right? And many of them here are selling it to the regulated entities. Now, question to both of you and to the audience. So you would have gone through some due diligence checklist when you are selling to a regulated entity, and you may be on the other side trying to sell that product to the regulated entity. Now, what are those, very quickly, give me 2 points on what is it that you check, Devang, and you may be diligenced too. 2 points, and 2 points for you,
Yeah,
and 2
first
points
Devang.
for the audience.
Oh, it's difficult to just answer in 2 points. I think rather than like saying like very specific points, one is how deep is the domain understanding, and how much do they really relate to the mindset of a regulated entity. I think demonstrating that, understanding that is very important. Second thing we usually check is reference check. If they have already worked with a regulated entity, that's always a good thing. Hoping like the other regulated entity would have done their due diligence, so we can rely on that. And then there are kind of like the standard the RBI's cybersecurity guideline, right? Whether they are aligning with that, right? So that is kind of like a default thing that they need to pass through.
So I will. I don't know whether whatever we are saying is motivating you, but it's reality. So, to what he said, there are many parameters, and some of the things which he said are by something which have to be there by default, right? If you don't have an innovative solution, if you don't have that domain capability, you're anyway not there in the market. That's your strength, right? So it's okay. References, yes. What we definitely, there are 2 points which we look at, especially when it becomes core. One is obviously sustainability. How well you are funded, what is our roadmap. If something goes south, what could be the mitigation plan. Second is your regulatory mindset. Forget the mindset today. Do you have a process? Do you have a compliance officer who understands the regulatory framework? How are you? Finally, the regulatory ownership of those compliances rest with the regulated entity. But when we work with you, we want to ensure that you understand all of those and co-own those, though answerable is a regulated entity. Most of the times we have found people, talk that they have, good mindset and all that, but very few people have actually processes or compliance officers, who actually look at. So if you are serving a regulated entity, you better have a compliance function which understands the nitty-gritties of how you are compliant.
And to the audience, so if you are to sell, and what has been your most difficult diligenced point? Go on.
quick question. How do I get a company that can help me with the compliance? Because I can't do it alone. Because the rules are all very complex, I feel. So I don't know which company to approach to help me with that.
Most law firms do right now. Most of us understand fintech laws. So I was playing around on a wrapper, okay? I mean, you guys have fun, we also have fun. Built a wrapper and fed all the RBI regulations to it. And one of the things, 5% DLG, everybody knows. And it did not show up. Right. So some human in the loop is required. And some of these frameworks, I think most of us are trying to build, as law firms as well. We are trying to build those. Again, based on some foundational models already there in the market and building on it and then tweaking it for the right response. I think that's where we will get to.
All right.
Probably opportunity for some of you to start a compliance consulting business.
For sure.
Yeah, just going back to the previous question about, so I'm a founder of an AI startup. We sell AI middlewares to banks, NBFCs, and others, very early stage, just closing our seed round as we speak. So for me personally, it's been obviously a lot of the checks and balances with CISOs, with procurement teams. I've gone through all of that to land these deals. Obviously, it's been, if I were to just take two things, where we had to at least make it easier for them as the buyer to make the decision on us, was first make the AI infra on-prem, which is inside the bank's cloud, no access to the internet. They have complete control and governance on the data. That is one.
Did you co-create that solution?
No, so our solution is already deployable, one-click deployable in a bank's infrastructure. The second was also to give them the level of admin access, which I think was what he was referring to in terms of, in case we stop functioning, how can they control the system? Like you said, more knobs to the stove of sorts. How can they control the entire stack? And we give them the visibility, okay, these are the different layers. This is how you can control multiple systems. This is how you can customize, you can build on your own. So I think that's sort of, because as a startup, we compete with the biggest players, and similar startups like us may be better funded, but we still have to cross that. Especially when it's your first customer, it's really hard. Now it's easier because the reference checks and someone else has done the DD before you. So, but yeah, so two things. Early days, we might have to do a lot of infra to enable these things. So, yeah.
Right.
But this on-premise is just a mindset, right?
It is.
It is only control. So, for example, we are doing all our AI. We are rather said we will do all our experimentation on cloud. And when we scale, we'll bring it on-premise.
Yeah, that shift is happening now. So now I think a lot of initial phases, because people were not sure of where the data is going. Is it going to the ChatGPTs of the world? They didn't want that risk. Today, there is more clarity. So, yeah, I think now people are moving to the system that he mentioned.
Very, very quickly, Devang. As people are building these products, and if there is no regulatory clarity, is there any way you can suggest a few frameworks? For example, we have NIST framework for privacy. Now, are there any similar frameworks that someone can adopt while building AI products?
So I think there are frameworks which are available for foundation model builders and on fine tuning of foundation models, like the OWASP AI top 10. Right, that talks about what should go in training data. That talks about prompt injection and how to avoid that. For application builders on top of foundation models, I've not come across any frameworks per se. I think a lot of the kind of the frameworks that were adopted for cybersecurity for web applications, that continues to hold. And as we see more attack vectors, I'm sure like the industry and the ecosystem will come up with better suggestions and more like better frameworks.
Interesting, because I was double clicking on NIST's AI framework, but it's not as robust. Doesn't cover all the principles of responsible AI either. So I'm curious to know if anybody is aware of any of these global frameworks. Oh, okay. All right. It says
So,
time's
Shraddha, the
up.
frameworks may be there. The question is, how do you implement those frameworks? How do you ensure that?
Talks about the implementation piece.
Okay.
As in, what are those 10 things that you can do to meet an explainability? What are the 20 things that you can do to, for your discrimination related, right? So that is what the framework will kind of unravel.
So I'll just add, I have personally had 2 discussions on this with the regulator. Most of you are in Bangalore, and we have a very progressive regulator. The challenge,
Agreed. RBI is really progressive.
and they created this RBIH to facilitate a lot of innovation, work with the industry, and then work with RBI to create policies. At least there's a process and a framework. Obviously, they'll always mange more. They have been here for 3 years. We believe they could have done a lot more, but at least a great start point. This entire AI, Gen AI, and if you would have got a feel, is around probably low risk use cases. It's around learning from data. And if the regulator steps in and says, I understand customer service in a contact center when people call for service, why should each bank build this on its own? Why can't we create a community and do a sandbox and kind of anchor it? Or even this collection use case. And they're open to that idea. When we said the success is all about, data, consent, regulatory support, and learning from industry data. So the data points also when it comes, and they're open. I don't know what will happen, but basically the ask is that why don't you create a forum or create a common, don't do sandboxing, create solutions which we can create as an industry. And they have not said no. Where will it go? I don't know. But one advice is definitely please stay in touch with RBIH. You will get some leading themes in terms of where it is going, and you could align your efforts in that direction. I see probably for next 1.5 years, there will not be a clear guideline which will come in, because we've seen this pattern with the RBI over the last 6-7 years now, where something new, they allow it to kind of bubble up, investments get made and monitor what are the good and the bad, and then come with a guideline. So I
That's
guess
very post-mortem-ish.
it is not post-mortemish, it is practical. I think it is practical because they allow the innovation to happen, because they also wanting real data to understand. I know sometimes some people get caught, on the wrong foot. People who have got very, very invested suddenly may have to change their model. But I think for a larger benefit of the overall, society and community and industry, it's a necessary evil. So, yeah.
All right. But you actually see some of the banks. I mean, there are some regulators like Singapore's MAS, which has very clear guidance, which is good. Then it becomes easy to kind of develop those products. And if you were to talk about banks themselves coming up with the policies, the Bank of England has a very good AI policy, which talks about, most of them talk about the responsible AI principles, and they have their own interpretation of it. And that's how they've come up with a policy. I think very soon most Indian banks also would follow. Let me just quickly wrap up. How many of you are scared of AI? Of what it can?
I'm scared what it can do beyond what I want it to do.
So which means regulation is required, right? Some guardrails are required, right? Think of it as without any guardrails, it becomes even more scarier. And for me, it looks like you need some kind of a regulatory approach, which kind of brings a lot more clarity. And therefore, for people who are building it, there is certainty in their product build. Or do you think, on a raise of hand, no, it should just be principle-based? Principle-based?
Comes out before we know what is the applicability. And generally, for cybersecurity very specifically, I think it has always been little later to see what is
No, anything, whether it is any innovation
Yeah.
which has happened over the last 10 years, if you see, and I agree with them, it could be better, but I think the capability of the regulator to create a guideline which is encouraging innovation may not be there. Hence, they allow with conversations, and then they say, "Acha, what is the flip side?" And then they start. So it's a necessary evil. That's
Yeah,
the-
because it's very difficult to imagine all the use cases and in what way can a capability be used, right?
Yeah, and regulation that way becomes extremely difficult. So, on a raise of hand, how many think it should just be principle based? Okay, nobody wants it. Or should I say it should be? Or how many of you think it should be a light touch regulation? All right. And I also believe, like in Singapore, it was 8 national banks that came together and they co-created these policies. Maybe that's a good approach even for India, where some of these large banks kind of come together and build those principles or help build those regulations is what I think.
But also, like just to that point, like the Singapore's feet regulation, like that was pre-Gen AI, right? That was when we were working on like ML and data science, and like so it had like the models had evolved for 15, 20 years, right? And a lot of things were possible, right? Explainability that we started the discussion with, like, is much easier on that kind of models, like, than on the Gen AI model, right? I think it's even companies in Singapore, like they're finding it difficult to align with the feet principles, right? Because the models itself are not capable to be able to provide that, right? So, but it is a good approach to kind of get an ecosystem discussion going with the regulator. And I think Indian regulator that way, like RBI has been really good in like having discussions, like
I wish RBI was sitting here. You're praising them so much.
so yeah, I mean that goes without saying. You have to you have to praise the Lord.
So only 2 points I wanted to make, concluding your mic. But I got into banking industry only 6 years back. I was like you. I served for companies like Wipro, Citi, running P&Ls for IT services and all that. And when you are that side, you are only looking at the business side of it, right? You're only looking at the stakeholder. You know what RBI is looking at? What are their objectives? There are 2 objectives: stability of the financial system and protection of the customer's money which is there with the bank. These are the 2 driving principles. That is the pinnacle basis which their regulatory guidelines come in. In the process, there could be curbing of innovation or whatever it is, right? So that is number 1. And the good news, we have been, I think, very cynical about this entire subject, is that in spite of all this uncertainty, a conservative bank like Karnataka Bank has decided that it will go ahead. It will not wait for everything to clear out. But it will go ahead where we have confidence that it is not going to create reputation loss or risk which we can manage. So there are cases, pre-delinquent contact, bots. There are cases like, but always in a co-pilot mode. There are situations where we are going to use this not for a decision, but for contextualizing a cam sheet. We call it a credit memo. A person would be doing it, but now it will pick up multiple documents and create a memo for the person to decide faster. So there are use cases which we are saying we'll move forward. We'll move forward in a pilot. We'll learn. We'll bring controls. If we wait for all the controls, all the regulations, then I think we'll keep waiting for the next 2 years.
On that note, thank you so much. Oh, you have a question? Okay.
Question. Not sure if you are from the banking background. There is a ease committee already by the government for the PSU banks. Last 6-7 years they are already working. Like it's happened in Pune. Yeah. And later on, right now. Yeah. Right now it is on E7 is where they are working, and they have a committee already, especially on the AI cloud and the cloud usage and SaaS products usage. Especially my wife works in Canara Bank. Okay. I have an account with your bank, my association. So I have a lot of inside details, and I help her to pass her the quarterly what the test they conduct. being an IT guy, I write her questions. So that way I came to know a lot of knowledge where government is already having a committee, but not necessarily on the AI side, but on the rest of the digital side, they already have a committee in place. Just I thought to share it.
There will be committees. I know Ministry of Finance is running a program called PACE. I'm forgetting the name, but they are actually forcing the public sector banks to adopt certain things which they didn't adopt, cloud and multiple other technologies. They basically put a framework saying do this in this time frame.
So on that note, we may see very soon on the AI side also by the government, no doubt in it.
There already is Feb 2025.
Yeah, she said that there's a
So there is
discussion paper already.
Yeah. On that note, thank you so much. We ran out of time long ago, but I think it was all of you were so interested, and I saw your faces, and I said, okay, let me talk more. Thank you so much, and very happy to have this focused conversation. We should do more of these conversations. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I want to take a selfie with the audience.
Absolutely. Before that, we'll just hand over a quick token of appreciation. Thank you so much to our moderator, Sharda, and to our panelists for joining us this evening. Thank you so much. Folks, we're having our keynote with Shankar Maravada in the main grand ballroom, so if you could head over there.